Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Friday Reads, which is a SpringAthon Friday Reads in a way, as you could probably conclude from the title. SpringAthon was the readathon where you were supposed to read at least one nonfiction book about nature, and it ran from the 1st of May to the 14th of May, so it ended already a week ago. But I thought it would be a good idea to use this Friday Reads for a sort of a wrap-up. How did I do? How many books did I read? And also, what am I reading still for the SpringAthon, because I took my cue from Doris from all the books and Heidi from my reading life and just extended the readathon for my own purposes towards the end of May. So I'm still reading books about nature, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. First, the books that I actually finished within the official framework of the readathon, so from the 1st to the 14th of May, and those were 5 books, which is pretty good, I feel, because I also read other things. And the first 3 I'm not going to spend much time talking about because I already talked about those books in multiple Friday Reads, and most of them were finished last week, so I talked about them last week. The first one, of course, is Susan Orlean, The Orchid Thief, first published in 1998, which I finally read. I told you that I felt I'm the only one on the planet who hasn't read that book, which turned out not to be true, because a lot of you kindly left me a comment that they hadn't read the book either. So that was good to know. And now I read it. So now it's up to you. All of you who commented that you hadn't read the book either. It's up to you to finally read it, pick it up and read it. And I told you last week, I really enjoyed it. If you missed my Friday Reads last week, it's about one particular orchid thief in Florida, but it's also about the history of orchids, how they came to be such an obsession for us, about the orchid trade. I thought it was fascinating, and I can only repeat myself in saying, and orchid people are really, really weird. And I absolutely enjoyed that part of the book. The other book that I finished and I also raved about many times is, of course, Wendy Williams' The Language of Butterflies, which was first published in 2020. And this was what I call a chance encounter. I was looking for a book and was browsing script, and I saw this one and I tried it and I loved it. And it is about, the language of butterfly is maybe putting you on the wrong track. It is the history of butterflies and how they work, really. Like physically, how they eat and how they migrate, and what it means for the environment. And so it's a book about butterflies. And I told you I love this book, even though I'm not a butterfly fan. I'm not an orchid fan, and I'm not a butterfly fan. I like it when I see one. I can't identify it. I just say, oh, look at the beautiful blue butterfly or brown butterfly. I think the only one I can identify is a monarch, and maybe the yellow ones, which we call Zitronenfalter in German, which means lemon butterfly. But the rest, that's all a mystery to me. But this book was an absolute delight. And so was the next one that I read. That was Katie Mack, The End of Everything, Astrophysically Speaking, also published last year. Katie Mack is an astrophysicist, and she talks in this book about the state of affairs when it comes to research about the end of the universe. So she also explains the beginning, so that we have a frame of reference, the Big Bang and the expansion of the universe. And then she discusses various theories about what will happen in billions of years. Will the universe just go on expanding and become completely empty, or will it come down again to a single spot, so a crunch, or various theories. I really enjoyed this book. I'm a nerd. I'm not an astrophysicist. That's not what I mean. But I like these kind of books about stars and physics and astrophysics. Yeah, if they are well explained, and this book is well explained, so you don't need mathematics. It's not for people who have a degree in physics or in mathematics. It's just for regular folks like me, interested in the subject, but with no more fundamental knowledge about it than high school mathematics. That's what I did and nothing else. A lot of you commented, or a few, I mean, not huge numbers, but quite some of you commented about, well, I don't want to read about this because it's gloomy, because it's about the end. And that is true because it is about the end, yes, but it's not a gloomy book at all. At least it wasn't for me. Maybe partly because the end she talks about, the possible ends of the universe, is, in the future in a way that I can't even fathom. Like if it's, 500 billion years in the future. So it's not a threat now to us, to me now, or to, our children or children's children, or even like 1,000 generations onwards. But it's also, it's maybe me that I don't find it gloomy that stuff will end, that's how life goes, and whether it's our life or whether it's a plant's life or other animals' life, not ours, but another animal, or whether it's a star or what have you. Yeah, that all ends, and that's not, for me personally, not gloomy. But that might be because I'm weird. Might be very well. But anyway, I can understand that that there are people out there who might not want to be interested in reading about how, everything ends, not just our life, but like everything. But if you are sort of thinking about reading it, but not 100% sure, it's not a gloomy book. It's also funny. She has a good sense of humor, the author, and it's not funny. It's not a comic, but she is also humorous about her work and about theories and about physicists. And so it's, if you are on the edge whether or not to read it, I would certainly say give it a try, and see whether you, despite the gloom that it's about the ending, that you can enjoy it. So those 3 books I already talked about, like I said, and I finished for various prompts during the readathon. But there are 2 more that I finished during the official readathon. And the first of those two is a fiction work. It's the only fiction work I read for the readathon. Is that true? I think so. No, I think so. Anyway, it's Bird Cottage by Eva Meyer, translated from the Dutch by, let me check, Antoinette Fawcett. First published in Dutch in 2016, and then this English translation in 2018. It was a reread for me because I read the original Dutch version because I know the author. She, not that we are close friends or anything, but she publishes in the same at the same publishing house I do in Holland. So I met her a couple of times, and I read her book when it came out 5 years ago in Dutch, and now I reread it in English, and I really like the translation. I think the translation is fabulous, and I can say that with confidence because I read the Dutch. So it's a really good translation. Anyway, it's and look at this gorgeous cover. It's you can't see this, but those and the letters are higher, so it's not flat. Yeah, I just enjoy that. Anyway, it's about a woman who actually lived, Gwendolyn Howard. She was born in the 1894 or something, and why she is known is when she was 40, almost 40 in 1938. So I think I got her birth year wrong, but anyway, you can check that out on Wikipedia. But when she was 40 in 1938, she moved from London. She came from a quite well-to-do family. And she was a musician, but she moved to the countryside and she bought a house there, which she called Bird Cottage. And she started observing birds. Not having a biology degree or anything, so she was an amateur observer, but she was really, really good at it. And she published a couple of books about her observations, and they were all quite best-selling. And this is a fictionalized account of her life. And I thought it was just charming and delightful. I thought that already in 2016, and I thought it again when I reread it now. It's just a very charming book about this quite unusual woman and about birds. So there is also a lot about birds. Eva uses diaries and observation, the observations that Len Howard wrote down in order to not only talk about her life, but also talk about the birds that she observed. And one of the things that Len Howard did was she individualized the birds, and she gave them names, and they had an individual character. So it's delightful. Really, if you're interested at all in that kind of book, in an unusual life, but also birds, then I can certainly recommend this one. And the fifth and final book that I finished during the actual official readathon was the group read of the readathon, The Way Through the Woods, Overcoming Grief Through Nature by Litt Woon, which was also the May pick of the Book Naturalists book club. You know about that book club run by Heidi and Doris, and they have, I will leave a link to their Instagram page down below, where you can check out the reading list. They already published a reading list for the whole year. We read a book about nature each month. Fiction and non-fiction, and this was it's a memoir, obviously, and this was the pick, the book club pick for May as well. So it was again 2 with 1 stone. Litt Woon was born in 1958, I believe, or 1959 in Malaysia, but she moved to Norway when she was 18 to study. She's an anthropologist, and she married a Norwegian. Oh, and I should say, sorry, the book was translated from the Norwegian by Barbara Haveland. Anyway, continuing. So Litt Woon married a Norwegian guy and stayed in Norway. And then about 10 years ago or something, her husband suddenly died unexpectedly and very young, because he was her age. And this book is about how she dealt with her grief through becoming a mushroom forager, or however you want to call that, those people who go into the woods and they collect mushrooms. That was actually something that her husband and she did. They wanted to do it together, to have a course about mushrooms and how you collect mushrooms. And then she did it on her own, and she became, not only did she do that one course, but she became a specialist. It's, I don't know how you call these people, a mushroom, an Norwegian certified mushroom professional. I don't even know that existed, which means in Norway that when you collect mushrooms, you can go to such a certified person and have your basket looked through whether it's actually a good idea to eat the stuff. So it's about her, entering the world of mushrooms, but also about her husband and about overcoming grief. I really enjoyed this. I wasn't over the moon in love, because I think for me, the whole thing about professional mushroom collection thing and the exams that she had to, that was just not the something that I was that interested in. And I'm not a mushroom person. Funnily enough, Heidi talked about the book. She really, really loved it, as she hates eating mushrooms. And I love eating mushrooms, but I'm not a mushroom person in terms of, when I go on a walk through the woods, that I'm like, oh, look, a mushroom. So I think it wasn't entirely a book for me. But if you are interested in mushrooms, if you're like Heidi, you hate eating mushrooms, but you're interested in foraging mushrooms and in the woods and in the history and how you learn about which mushrooms are edible and which ones aren't, then I think you will enjoy the book even more than I did. And again, it was a 4-star read for me, so it was a good book, but it didn't make me all gooey inside because I loved it so much. I think that's probably the best way to describe it, even though it's a bit gross. I don't want to be gooey inside. Anyway, I will stop now. So those were the 5 books that I finished during the official readathon. I didn't do too badly, I would say. I mean, you should look at my TBR, the video that I made before the SpringAthon started, because I picked, of course, the group read, and then I picked 4 books for each of the 4 prompts, and I ended up reading 2 of those, and for the other 2 prompts, I just picked different books. But that's me. That's what I always do. Anyway, I really got into this whole idea of nature books. I mean, I'm already getting into this idea, and I'm not a nature person. You know me, I'm a city person. I can't even identify the first tree I see unless it's a really maple or something. But other than that, flowers, birds. But I got into the idea of reading more about nature through the Book Naturalist Book Club. And then SpringAthon sort of gave it another push, and I decided, like I said, taking my cue from Heidi and Doris, to just read on. And the book that I'm currently reading, I just started, is Two Trees Make a Forest by Jessica J. Lee, which is a memoir. Also, Jessica J. Lee is a Canadian-born with Taiwanese roots, but is now living in London person, and she lived in Berlin while she wrote this book or something like that. But this is about the roots of her parents in Taiwan. So she explores Taiwan as an island and the history of Taiwan, but also vegetation and the mountains, and and combines that with the search for a family history after her grandparents passed away. I'm about not that far in, a couple of, I think 10, 20 pages or something, maybe 50 pages, 40 pages. And so far I'm really, really liking it. So that is what I picked up now for the extended SpringAthon. And the other book that I picked up or just started is a book that I wanted to read for quite some time, and that is Sea People by Christina Thompson. And I'm reading Sea People together with Heidi from my Reading Life as a buddy read, and we start this week. We have our first check-in day after tomorrow on Sunday. And I've already started it and really, really enjoy it. It's Christina Thompson is a historian. She was born in Switzerland, but she lives in Australia, New Zealand. She's married to a Maori man from New Zealand, and she writes about that history, Australian, New Zealand history, Maori history. And this book is about Polynesia, the sea people from Polynesia, the island group. I have no idea. I mean, I had to look up on a map exactly where they are. I know that it's in the Pacific Ocean, but the Pacific Ocean is quite big. And I have no idea about the history, but it's fascinating, where those people come from. The book explores where the people come from, how they lived, how they live now, how they were, quote unquote, discovered by Europeans. And what that meant for the islands. It's just something fascinating, especially because I have no idea. So I learned something about something that I find fascinating. That was a weird sentence, but anyway. So the Sea People will probably be the last book that I read for SpringAthon. But then again, I'm looking at the calendar. It's the 21st of May, so there's 10 days left. Who knows what will happen? Anyway, those were the books of the SpringAthon, my Friday reads dedicated to SpringAthon and books about nature. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to talking to you in the comments, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.